Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Shadow of Kyoshi Chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for Chapter 23, which is called Lost Friends. And this is the chapter you probably have been waiting for. This is the one I was waiting for with this book. It's the second half of the Kuruk backstory, and it's the big section of the backstory. The first bit gave us the sort of happier times, his training as the Avatar, things going great with his companions and friends. But then, what changes his life? What forces him down this path where the way it's like talked about in the first book about Kuruk's later life is that, you know, it just happened so quickly and he only lived to 33. What did happen for this Avatar? And it really plays on the way Kuruk has been presented as an Avatar up to now. Before these books, he's the negligent Avatar. He says that himself when he gives advice to Aang. He talks about how you need to actively shape your own destiny and the fate of the world. That's his advice to Aang, as if, I didn't do that enough, you need to do it. But the truth of it is just that he doesn't want to talk about what he actually was active as the Avatar doing. It's very important. He is a hero for what he did in terms of sacrificing his body and soul as the Avatar to protect humans from the spirits. That's the core of it here. You have to view him as that way. That he isn't this Avatar who just did nothing as the Avatar, who, like they say, just did bending contests with other people and is just known for being this fun-loving Avatar, carefree, didn't do a thing because from his perspective the world was at peace, even though stuff like the Dao Fei and the pirates were building up in the background. No, he was doing very, very important things as the Avatar. He just kept it from his friends, everyone close to him, and the only person who knows is Nyata, and now Kyoshi is finding out about it because there's a significant part of this that relates to Kyoshi's connection to Yoon as he is right now. So just really, really good stuff. Let's get into this. This is probably going to be a relatively long video because there's a lot of details here that I want to get into, because the details on Kuruk are probably the most important and significant things that the book reveals. So that's why I'm going to go through this kind of with a fine-tooth comb here. So we pick up with straight away into a vision. It's like Kuruk opened his eyes. Kyoshi is immediately experiencing a vision, and it is the second half of the vision from the previous time she had it. Again, she's in the same place, but this time she's warned the crew of the ship that brought her here, no matter what, don't come after me. I want to see the full vision. So he had meditated into the spirit world with Kelsang because he was so impressed that Kelsang was able to do something like that. It spoke to just the ingenuity of all of his friends. Of course, Kelsang is going to be his spiritual guide. So they meditate into the spirit world together. But when Kuruk arrives, he's separated from Kelsang. So he's on his own, and he immediately hears these hysterical screams. They're incessant. They're so violent, and he finds this spirit like smashing its head off something. And as he goes over to it, it basically like attacks him. And just before he sort of like passes out and goes back into the physical world, he gets a look at what this monstrous, you know, house-sized spirit was smashing its head against. The reflection on the silvery sheen was a hillside view of Yaoping town, and it was smashing its head off a where is it here? A pond of ice. So this is basically meant to be this idea of it's one of these kind of rifts between worlds, and the spirit is trying to open it just that little bit more to break through. And so immediately Kuruk is thrown back into the physical world and realizes that we're in Yaoping. This spirit is out for blood. If it gets in, it's going to kill people. So he grabs Kelsang's glider and, without telling his friends, goes off to the location that he saw just there and enters the spirit world, because he finds out that the place where this, you know, pond of ice, the other side of this mirror basically between worlds, it's in, where's the exact specific part here? Yeah, Yeah. He landed the glider and stood before the hole in the world, the gaping maw of darkness. He summoned his courage and ran inside. So it's in the salt mines in the neighboring mountains. So this rift that the spirit is trying to get through, Kuruk runs through on the other side and re-encounters this spirit. And he immediately enters into combat against this spirit because it's the only thing he can do at this point in time, because his friends are at risk here as well as just a lot of people of this town. He doesn't know how long the battle raged. He only knew with grim certainty that the right avatar had been chosen for this task. This foe was a beast and he was a hunter. So this gets into the setup from the earlier bit of backstory on Kuruk, that in a way, yes, he is an avatar perfectly suited to fight these massive battles against the most powerful spirits. He's one of the most talented benders in the world, who has not just rested on his, prodigy skills as a bender, but has done the hard work, tested himself against as many benders as possible. Every unique bender he encounters, he learns from, and he has that philosophy of he's not just a bender of 4 elements, but that makes him this very unique bender, able to bend all 4. And the transition between styles is so fluid for him and so on, the way they described it. He, in a way, was the only avatar who could possibly fight these battles against the spirits. But this specific one, it took bringing all 4 elements to bear against the maddened spirit to bring it down. But bring it down he did. He was victorious, the town was saved, all would be well. And it seems like, okay, cool, Kuruk was forced to defeat a spirit, but he saved the town. Great. Where's the twist? The twist comes immediately afterwards. The next morning, his friends found the avatar crawling blindly through the streets of Yaoping, foaming at the mouth. It was days before he could speak. Destroying the spirit had cost him a piece of his own somehow. He was bleeding inside, losing something more vital than blood, vitality leaching away in a manner no healer could fix. He was cold. Him, a child of the north who laughed at blizzards and swam laps around icebergs, was cold. Nothing pumped through his veins. And then they also covered that, he tries to tell his friends about the specifics of what happens, but he can't bring himself to. And we find out that if he has sort of this strength, but it's also a weakness as a character, it's that he really can't stand to see his friends suffer. So he has suffered for this fight with the spirit, and he is not going to include them ever in what he needs to do, because it turns out that this spirit attack is not just a one-off, it's this growing trend. Spirit incursions into the physical world by angry spirits out to kill, out to slaughter. He has to be the one to do this, and he's going to do it on his own. He's not going to include his team avatar in on this, because he knows that it destroys his soul. It says directly here, destroying the spirit had cost him a piece of his own spirit. That's something we didn't really know about before, but it's these dark spirits that he's fighting, and he's taking damage in these fights despite his skill, just because of how powerful spirits are, and his spirit is getting damaged. Body and spirit, he is slowly taking on damage as these fights go on. But this is still early in the kind of origin story of this whole dynamic. They leave him at this inn, and the doctor just says there's nothing wrong with his body and just told him to rest. But he still has that sort of chill, basically, that has lingered on from this long battle with the spirit. And this maid comes in and gives him some distilled wine, and that seems to be something that cuts through the chill. And then the other thing that cuts through the chill is when the maid smiled and gently laid a hand upon his chest. The avatar clasped it like he was drowning. And then the next morning, his friends come in and find the two of them sort of in bed together. That there are your things that, for Kuruk, are like the only things that are able to make him feel normal again as a person after these duels with spirits. It's his vices. It's what was talked about with Nyata and Heiran earlier on in the book, of her accusations at him of, you ruined Kuruk because of the alcohol, the womanizing, and so on. And here is an example of that. Again, it speaks to sort of the kind of maturity level of the books, that they're willing to just showcase this thing of just, yeah, like he slept with this woman here, and his friends walk in on him, and their reaction of like, Kelsang didn't judge. Jeonju didn't care, being of the opinion that if the Avatar had a certain desire, the Avatar should slake it. And Heiran, though she would never admit it, lost a great deal of respect for him in that moment. The door to the firebender's heart, while not locked forever, had been firmly shut. There was always going to be a portion of her closed off to those who couldn't master themselves. And this is the other weakness of Kuruk, is just that he is aware that he does have these weaknesses that are his vices, but it links into just like he's protecting his friends by not telling them about this, but he has to fight these spirits to save the world. And the only thing that can help him like recover from these fights is leaning into these other weaknesses in his life, these vices that are going to make him look bad in front of his friends, and ultimately help him to sort of almost develop that reputation as being the negligent Avatar, who, as we get here, is going to primarily be known for sort of sleeping during diplomatic meetings and, potentially being drunk during them as well. But we'll see as it goes on. So immediately, this is sort of one of those moments that has hindered Kuruk from ever potentially properly being with Heiran. This is before she gets married, of course. So that if things had gone differently, it might have been a relationship, Heiran and Kuruk. But moments like this, that encounter with that spirit, the result of it, how he had to recover from it, has led to this sort of situation here. So, they go on their adventures again. They quickly get over this incident. He loved them so much, their intelligence, their aspirations, their sheer nobility. They were simply good people. There was so much the group could do for this world. That was why, when the second spirit attack came, he went to face it alone again. He had a bad dream during a visit to the Fire Nation that showed him a rift in a cenote supplying sacred water to a corner of Ma'inka Island. Ma'inka Island, of course, being the home island of the Sauwan clan. So Kuruk saved that from a spirit here. It's this spirit that is described as a mass of writhing beaks snapping and licking their way to the surface. He stabbed with ice, he stabbed with stone, his eyes closed. The screams of terror his own. His former hunting partners of his youth would have scorned him for not performing a clean kill. He could not look upon the dying thing. So even he's aware that these fights, that there's inherent violence to it. He's aware that it is this, borderline like sacrilegious thing, that if more people were aware of what he was doing, even though they'd sort of agree with him protecting humans, the fact that he has to do it by killing spirits just makes him look terrible in this whole thing. But when he crawls out of the water here after taking out this spirit, this is where he meets Nyata, and it's a great reveal here. The man was a fire national from a clan or tribe he didn't recognize. His name was Nyata, he said, and after receiving a premonition, the elders of the Bonti had sent him here to give aid to the Avatar. So this is how they meet. The Bonti tribe specifically were aware of this kind of threat of the spirits coming in, and that the Avatar would face it, and sent a member of their own tribe to help Kuruk, and that is Nyata here. So I love the Bonti tribe inclusion in this, of them being the truly, spiritual sages of the world, unlike the more sort of politically focused sages we've often met before, who might have some spirituality to them, but nowhere near the likes of, say, Guru Patik or so many of the other spiritual characters we have actually met. The Bonti tribe are the real deal, and so it's significant here, Kuruk meeting Nyata, having someone to be there with him on this secret side of his life as the Avatar. So then we get the whole shaman healer firebending analysis technique explained here. Nyata performed some kind of diagnostic ritual, guiding heat along his energy pathways, similar to the way a northern healer would use the water within a patient's body. He confirmed what Kuruk had already guessed, that coming into contact with these dark creatures and destroying them was causing damage to his own spirit. Nyata repaired what he could, but admitted a permanent toll would be taken each time another one of these battles was fought. already Kuruk was going to be out of the running for longest era in the Avatar history books. So these fights are why Kuruk lived such a small life, only living to 33. Every fight he fought, chipped away at him, both his body and his soul, in terms of taking injuries, but also more internal injuries to his spirit itself. And even Nyata having the ability to sort of, analyze and also heal to a degree the more spiritual side of Kuruk, it could only slow it down so much. But I like that confirmation that the technique is confirmed to be a proper spirit analysis technique. It's a technique that doesn't analyze your physical body as such as it does your spirit itself, and has the ability to sort of heal small aspects of issues with your spirit. So that's really, really good. It also mentions here he threw up blood all over the Fire Sage's robes, getting across the idea that it is physical injuries as well building up here during these fights. So yeah, this confirms his decision. He will not include his friends in this. This is the decision he makes. It's going to be Nyata and Kuruk, not Heiron, not Kelsong, not Jeonju. So it is revealed, though, that he does take breaks from the missions with his friends. So he does separate himself from them to a degree here to go to the hidden library of the Bonti, a contender for the greatest repository of spiritual knowledge in the physical realm. And they go through every relevant book to try and find some sort of a way to figure things out. And so what they figure out basically is that, okay, the spirits are trying to force their way through newly created cracks in the boundary between the worlds, and they don't know why, but that they are these new cracks being made. They're not like the known ones in the world. Normally places where spirits would cross over were ancient and sacred and rare. Special circumstances like the twilights of hallowed dates were required. That didn't seem to be the case anymore. So something new is creating these rifts. And we know what it is as the audience, but Kuruk hasn't figured it out yet. And it says here, as more attacks came, he realized he could stalk the dark creatures across the spirit world itself. So this is him fully adapting to the role that he has to take. He becomes the spirit hunter, he said in the last chapter that he was, to Kyoshi. And he actively begins to hunt them and sort of preemptively take down these spirits before. Whereas before, I suppose, he was just reacting to imminent disasters. Here he sort of seeks them out earlier. And it's just his, what do they describe it as, preternatural tracking skills, even working in the spirit world. And yeah, he fights them, he uses his bending, and it says here, he tries his best to, minimize collateral damage to humans, to save them as best as possible. He tries to satiate the spirits and calm them down. It says here, each time he found one, Kuruk tried his best to placate the being's anger at the cost of his blood and sweat and bones. Nothing worked. To save lives, he had to fight. He had to kill. So I think that's an important statement, that he tried every single time to try and calm it down, talk it down in some way, turn it light without violence, but it never worked. They were so violent. Something had made them just so angry he couldn't just turn it, and it left him only one option. Because they say here, they searched for a better technique to subdue their foes, but found none. Perhaps it had yet to be invented. Obviously alluding to, in the future, Unalaq would invent the spirit bending technique, which is a more peaceful way to pacify spirits. Kuruk would have, loved to have had that technique. It would have really, saved the rest of his life, basically. But yeah, I just like that they clarify that he tried, but he was forced into a situation where it was either kill or let humans die. They're the only options, really. And yeah, he and Nyata told no one what they did, and they note that it's as if they were hiding crimes in a way, that what they were doing so much bad to spirits here to save people, that yes, it would look bad to the air nomads and the Bonti, but it would even look bad to normal people, the amount of times that they've had to fight spirits. And yeah, this is where we get the clarification of how he was viewed by the rest of the world, because he was so focused on the spirit stuff, he wasn't getting involved in the normal affairs of the world. The world went on. It had competent people looking after it. Kuruk, never one for meetings where the quickest minds were forced to adopt the pace of the slowest, began to sleep through them, exhausted by the lingering pain and the wine he drank to dull it. Jonji would inevitably work things out with diplomats and ministers and ambassadors by the time he woke up. His nights were spent carousing at parties in taverns, at contests of bending prowess, trying to feel as human as possible, with as many different humans as possible. He secretly hoped Nyata would find a sacred text declaring the official treatment for his symptoms was to be close to life, joy, and the touch of warm bodies. But no, the hedonism of his self-prescribed healing process was his own weakness showing through, nothing else. Nyata partook in the treatment as well. The formerly austere sage pursued excess with the immoderation of a man denied. So this is what was referenced earlier in the book with Heiron sort of criticizing Nyata for being the one to sort of ruin Kuruk. And here it's obviously revealed that it wasn't just Kuruk who had these sort of vices and indulgences, that Nyata had them as well, and they sort of both just sort of amplified it within each other as like the only way that Kuruk felt he could heal from these events, because they obviously get across the idea. I think Nyata had already said that he took long breaks after these fights to just sort of meditate and heal to keep himself together, but then to get some enjoyment from life he would just, this is where the alcohol, the womanizing, I suppose, comes in, and so on. And the way they present it here, it's just this very real situation of this avatar who has been forced to do these dark deeds to protect the world, and he knows that what he's doing to sort of get through it is not great, and that it's clearly a weakness that he has, but it's the only thing that can keep him going through this. And it's dark, but it's good that we have this different avatar, this whole secret aspect of his life that we never knew about, and it's all being kind of explained here. Yeah, and it says here, he barely noticed his friends splitting apart, the treasures of his life scattered all over the four nations to pursue their own paths. They'd all come to the same conclusion. They were accomplishing nothing of worth in the avatar's company. And yeah, it felt like one day he was playing his daily game of Paisho with Jonju, and the next he was reading Jonju's letter of admonishment for not attending Heiron's wedding. Then we get more context behind why he wrote the love poem to Heiron, and the timing of it, and so on. Kuruk had been out of his mind with grief when he showed up at Kelsong's with that poem. A spirit had tried to break through the day before, and his pent-up fury at himself for lying to Heiron by omission about so many different things for all these years exploded. He had annihilated the creature with the full power of the avatar state, an unworthy act no matter the circumstances. The poem was a feeble attempt to turn back time to a point where he wasn't such a miserable failure who abused Yang Chen's gifts, an age where he was still within reach of deserving Heiron's love. And yeah, he channeled his sorrow into more research with Nyata, longer expeditions into the spirit world, and this is where Glowworm comes in. They finally figured out that it's a specific spirit causing all of these rifts, organizing all of this to a degree, and that it is Father Glowworm, the World Borer. So we get the full title of Father Glowworm. It's Father Glowworm, the World Borer, it within the whole. So the World Borer is, I think, a great name for him, and that's his special ability. He has the ability to create these cracks in the between worlds that other spirits can then, hammer away at, basically, to break through. And his whole thing, as they get a little bit from sort of his perspective, he learned Glowworm had the power to rasp away at the barrier between the physical and the spiritual world, leaking wisps of its essence through the cracks it made to bask in the warmth and chaos of the mortal realm at his pleasure. Did he take the occasional human here and there? Yes, but what hunter didn't snatch up choice prey when the opportunity presented itself? He was a wise and crafty predator. It could create tunnels to any location in the physical world, but kept its exits in deep and dark places where humans wouldn't notice. and never lingered around the same settlements for very long. If lesser spirits wanted to make a go for the lands of humans using his abandoned passages, that was none of its concern. So him just trying to do his own thing, taking humans here and there, just being Glowworm, he didn't care if any of the other tunnels he made along the way were used by other spirits. He's just fine, that's okay. And this is when they then get into the idea of what was mentioned much earlier on in the book about the idea of the name of a spirit who has a name that they call themselves, and the power of that name. Nyata called it a curse when Kyoshi mentioned the name to him, and they sort of clarify that here. Kuruk's mistake was trading names with it. Spirits with self-appointed names were incredibly powerful and dangerous, and there was a power in introductions. Knowing Father Glowworm's name finalized the curse that had slowly been building upon the Avatar over the years. It dried the ink on the contract. Father Glowworm knew it too. The two of them were in it together for the long haul. Perhaps they would have fun. And so this is when they enter their big fight. Their fight nearly created a gaping hole in the boundary between realms. So this is to me, when I read that line, that was like, that's basically, I suppose, meant to be an event of the level of Korra blocking the Spirit Vine canon, which created a permanent spiritual portal. That this fight between a full power Avatar, one of the most powerful benders in the history of the world, and an extremely powerful spirit like Glowworm, their fight nearly created like a permanent spirit portal. That's my interpretation of that line, and I think that's really, really cool, given that we know that, Korra made one, and then we know like Vatu made the northern and southern spirit portals, so this is sort of how those portals are made. It's Glowworm has the ability to make sort of like small cracks that can later grow as like portals into the world, but to make the big ones that are permanent, last forever, and are just immediate transport points, something huge has to happen, and Kuruk versus Glowworm was one of them. Their energies bit into each other like blades clashing edge to edge. With a strike that nearly broke the foundations of the bedrock around them, Kuruk wounded Father Glowworm grievously, and the spirit diminished in size and power several times over, but it managed to escape, wriggling away into an endless labyrinth of darkness. So their fight ends in this tie, and I like the analogy here from Pai Sho. The disappointing secret of Pai Sho most novices never learned was that at the very highest levels, half of the matches between masters ended in unsatisfying, inconclusive draws. He'd done lasting damage to his enemy, enough to ensure the spirit would keep out of the human world for at least a generation of two, and it had marked him in return. Neither of them would ever fully heal from the encounter. They would know each other in their bones forever, like old friends. And this is how the backstory ends. There's still a little bit more of this chapter left as we come out of the vision and Kyoshi and Kuruk talk. But there's the full backstory basically given to us here. Now, they add a little bit more onto this as we go forward into the later chapters, just to give a little bit more context to this. But for the most part, that's the full thing there. That Kuruk and Glowworm's fight, basically, they sort of have a piece of each other within each other. That is why Yun has been able to track Kyoshi wherever she goes, and now that Kyoshi has fully, I suppose, restored those memories from Kuruk, they are now hers as well. She knows of her connection with Glowworm. She now can track where Glowworm is, or Yun is, because Yun ate Glowworm. So this clarifies to us, okay, this is how she's going to find Yun. They are both now going to be drawn to each other. The return of this fight from before, just in a new form. It was Kuruk and Glowworm in the past. It's going to be Kyoshi and Yun now. And, they can both track each other. This is the fight that was always destined to happen. There's two aspects to this fight. It's the return of Kuruk and Glowworm, that fight finally getting settled. But also, on a personal level, it's Kyoshi and her friend Yun. How will that come to a conclusion as well? But before we get into the second half of the chapter, really, really great stuff to just get across. Like the tragic backstory of Kuruk, sacrificing himself. He completely active the whole time as the Avatar, obviously spending all of his time investigating and fighting spirits, but still doing something to prevent lots and lots of people from dying. That if he ever lost one of those fights, who would be able to take down those powerful spirits? And that is the value of what he accomplished. That there are not many avatars who could face that many powerful spirits and still keep going this whole time, and then investigate it to the point where they find out the one behind it and then stop that. So he's the one who basically stops Glowworm from being able to make as many of these small rifts between worlds as possible. And he diminishes his Glowworm's power enough to where Glowworm has to be cautious about when he acts, which is why Yoon is actually able to defeat him in the earlier chapters. It's only because Kuruk landed a blow on Glowworm that was the equivalent of like defeating the spirit like 3 or 4 times over. And Yoon was just the one to finish the job against a weakened Glowworm, which is actually what Glowworm said to Yoon. You think you're just as good as earthbending as Kuruk. Don't laugh. It's an insult to me that you would say that. Kuruk was so much better than you, and here's the confirmation of that. And yeah, like the chapter being called Lost Friends is equally as tragic. That in that, like, you sort of are like, yes, like you appreciate, you know, Kuruk in a way. You can agree with what he did, keeping his friends out of this dark business with the spirits, and that, you know, he is so much more powerful than they are. He would be putting them at risk against such powerful spirits. But the fact that he didn't include them with anything, any of the sort of emotional issues he went through in terms of the effects that these fights had on him, how differently would things have gone if he had just been able to get some like emotional support from his friends? He didn't keep it all a secret, but he always had that fear that if he told them, they wouldn't be able to keep them, he wouldn't be able to keep them out of getting involved in the fights themselves. And so Nyata was the only sort of constant there in his life at that point. But the implication there is almost that like they were so involved in it together that neither of them were like properly supporting each other like emotionally, which is why, you know, their solution for that was drinking, women, all that sort of stuff. The only thing that made them feel normal was just fun stuff where they would just interact with a lot of humans. That everything they did was about spirits. They just took the fun stuff in life of interacting with other humans and just went for it. And can you blame them particularly? I think the answer is like no, like as dark as it is and stuff like that. So really good stuff. But yeah, Kyoshi like just comes out of this vision like just with a completely different view on Kuruk. You know, she stepped away from her predecessor's memories gently, like they were pieces of crystal too delicate to handle. She says, she was grateful for his presence this time around. She couldn't have handled watching those memories on her own. Like she was already afraid of Glowworm, and that she, as he is now, she saw a vision of Glowworm at his most powerful, and that Kuruk was the one who faced him, and realizes like she saw these fights happen in front of her. You know, by the time of his death, Kuruk would have been more injury than unbroken skin underneath his clothes. His appearance in the spirit world must have been altered by his own perceptions and preferences. He remembered a version of himself from before the worst days of his life took over. So she asked the obvious question: why were there so many angry spirits during your era? And he was about to tell her about this beforehand, but now he doesn't. That's a question for another day. In order to give you the aid you sought, I had to share memories of my avatar Hood and Father Glowworm. Now that you remember this portion of your past life, you'll be able to find your boy in the physical world. Trust me. And she's like, what about the rest of your memories? So she wants to know what happened after that. There's little to see after I lost my friends. So he specifically also doesn't bring up the stuff with Umi and Ko. I'll be doing a separate video on Kuruk after I get through this whole chapter analysis series. So I'll have more analysis and speculation on the whole thing. But basically, my thoughts now on the whole Umi and Ko situation is that we now have tons of context for why Ko does what he does. Ko is aware that Kuruk is a spirit hunter, and would obviously want vengeance to a degree against someone who has killed so many spirits. That would explain why Ko would have much more reason actually to punish Ko, rather than what we knew before, which was that, like, oh, he just punishes them for being inactive as the Avatar, apparently. But now, knowing the reputation that Kuruk has with spirits, that makes much more sense, Ko coming after him and taking Umi's face. But it also adds a lot more to Umi. Him meeting Umi, which clearly has to happen after a lot of these incidents in his life, meeting her and agreeing to marry her, she must have had such a significant impact on his life at his lowest moments. Someone who could sort of take him away from the way he was doing his recovery process beforehand, the dynamics with Nyata and so on. Like, she must be some amazing person to have been able to help Kuruk in those later parts of his life. And I really wish the book had gone just a little bit more, done a little bit more, and had those moments of him meeting Umi and the significance of meeting Umi to him. And, they also, they talked about, meeting Glowworm, the name is a curse. Did he tell her about Glowworm and her being taken by Ko, her face getting taken by Ko, was an aspect of that curse as well? Or did he not tell her about Glowworm, and then Ko is just, rebel spirit as we sort of know him as? I think that would have really put it over the edge to just have like this final happiness in his life, and then it to get taken away by another powerful spirit like Ko. I think mentioning Ko, I think, would have just been so great in this book. But anyway, we'll move on. She finally, realizes she's able to process everything she's just learned about Kuruk. And she finally just says, "I'm glad I finally reached you, Avatar Kuruk," she said, meaning it wholly. His shoulders hitched and they eased. She didn't consider he might have needed this connection as much as her, assuming a past life could need anything. And I really like that. It's just that Kyoshi now realizes the importance of having met and learned about Kuruk, but her thanking him in a way, like, I'm glad I finally actually learned about you and connected with you. It's been helpful. How good that must be for him, as a past Avatar, having to guide the current Avatar, considering his own life of failure, the mistakes that he made. He's able to be of help to the new Avatar despite everything that happened in his life. I love that sense of just the burden eased on him, that he has succeeded in this mission, and in the afterlife, basically. So he does say, "There's one more thing I have to tell you, but I don't know if it's ultimately worth it. I don't want to cause you more pain." And I like this. Kyoshi read his grimace and realized another flaw in Kuruk's character. Outside of his bending opponents, perhaps, he could not stand seeing other people get hurt. "You might as well. Come with me." So they walk over to an area of the spirit world that has been ripped apart. And it's revealed that this is the place that Yun ripped apart with his emotions right back at the start of the book. And Kuruk basically makes the contrast between, look at what happened to you when you were angry at me. You ripped apart the spirit world, but then you realized what was going on, and it healed over again once you realized that your anger was perhaps misplaced. Yun's devastation, his emotions, hasn't healed over. It's staying open. It's this wound that is just wide open here, and it's festering because he's clinging on to that anger and will not let it go. And so she's like, I know Yun's not in his right mind because of Father Glowworm's influence. And then finally, Kuruk reveals the truth. The thing that she needs to know before she goes in to face Yun again. No, you've held on to that excuse long enough. What I needed to tell you is that spirits can possess a human being's body, and they might even merge with a person to give them new shapes and forms, but they don't take over people's thoughts. Yun is in complete control of his actions. He has been this whole time. And Kyoshi's reaction is just like, oh. And like, she just can't speak. And Kuruk is just like, I'm sorry, kid. I wish it wasn't so. But this is when it's actually revealed that, the people who came with her on the boat, did actually pull her out after a certain amount of time. And then the chapter ends with just like, I thought I told you not to come after me. And he's just like, you did, but that was obviously a stupid order and we were never going to obey it. And she's like, how dare you defy your avatar. So kind of fun little moment at the end. But she's pulled up from the water just feeling that like, okay, it's this legacy. She is Kuruk's legacy, and Yoon, through everything that's happened, has been sort of chosen in a way as sort of Glowworm's legacy through whatever has happened. But it's also specifically Yoon and her. So it's these two dynamics coming to this final conclusion here as we go into sort of the next couple of chapters. And yeah, this is where she figures out, this is how he had tracked her wherever she was. And now, because she is connected with Kuruk's memories and Kuruk's connection to Glowworm, she now can sense where Yoon is, and she notes this like faint presence of his and what direction it's coming from. So this is how they're going to find each other and hunt each other down. But before we get to the fight, there is one last interlude chapter with Yoon to get through before that. This is the one to properly explain what makes Yoon snap into being this violent character. Because where we left it off, he obviously ate Glowworm and sort of now has his powers. He has the ability to get back to the physical world. But when we left off the fight, it was still kind of Yoon as he was before. What changes Yoon to hating everyone? He already hates Jeonju, but what really morphs him into the character that he is now, where he seems like he's just unstoppable? Nothing will ultimately satiate his anger, as we see. He's not really willing to close that rift of that emotion. And that's what Kyoshi is going to have to deal with here. Zoryu's told her in like the chapter before this, basically, or 2 chapters before this. Now Kuruk has told her the truth. They're his thoughts. Like the spirit can't really influence your actions. He may have more power now or look slightly different. But if he's thinking something, it's his thoughts. And then Zoryu is kind of pointing out, but like, yeah, look at his actions. Look at what he has done and what he hasn't done. Who hasn't he targeted? You. And why is that? Even though everything he has targeted has ultimately affected you in some way. It's because he himself is struggling with the idea of, does he hate you? And ultimately, the one who took his avatar hood away from him is you, Kyoshi. And they're the things Kyoshi has to think about going into this final fight. And it's all building up really, really well here. But, like I said, the ultimate success of this chapter is completely changing your opinion on Kuruk. You cannot really view him as being the negligent avatar anymore. Yes, ultimately still, his inactivity on a political front roughly led to the Dao Fei and pirates in the world becoming a bigger thing. And that was the challenge that then his companions had to face in the aftermath of his death. That the reason his companions developed their grisly reputations is because of the legacy of what Kuruk didn't face. But the reason his companions didn't have to end things in bloodbaths with spirits is also because of Kuruk's actions. So Kelsong developing his sort of living typhoon moniker with how he dealt with, Tagaka's grandfather or something, killing people out in the water kind of inadvertently with his kind of amazing airbending out at sea. Heiron and her Agni Kai victories leading to people's deaths. And of course, most probably notable of all, Jeonju becoming the gravedigger of Zulu Pass. And how he decided to handle the growing threat of the Dao Fei. Something that couldn't be handled with mediation, but could have been perhaps if the Avatar was there, but he had to handle in his own way with Kuruk not around. And just the tragedy of just that almost lack of communication of like, how would things have gone if they knew what Kuruk was dealing with? How would things have gone with the companions if Kuruk was there with them to be that Avatar diplomat with them? But he protected them. He did things his own way, and he has this legacy as the Avatar where he is publicly known as being this weak Avatar who is just known for being negligent and not having accomplished all that much, living a short life, being nothing like Yang Chen. And Kyoshi now realizes that is anything but the case. And that is such a successful thing to do, to fit that into what we know already. The reason why Kuruk would basically say to Aang, I was a negligent avatar, because of course he still wouldn't want to just randomly to every avatar just mention, this is what I'm known for. He would obviously point out the flaws of, like, I did my own thing as the avatar doing this, but the main thing he focuses on is what he didn't do as the avatar, and not what he actually did do, and the heroics of that given the circumstances. It's really, really good. But that's been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.